Usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there's this underlying expectation of precision. Why?
Absolutely.
Like it's practically like engineering. You fall off a bike, your arm hurts, you go to the hospital, and the X-ray shows that stark, jagged white line right across the bone.
Yeah, you can literally point to the problem.
Exactly. The doctor just points at the film and says, well, there it is, right there, broken.
Totally binary. I mean, it's a clean break, literally and figuratively.
Broken or not broken. You put a cast on it, you wait 6 weeks, it heals. And we love that kind of clarity. We crave it.
We absolutely do. Human psychology is deeply, deeply comforted by things that are visible, things that are categorizable and, linearly solvable. If you can see the fracture, we understand the pain.
Right. But then you step into the world of high-level leadership. You look at the landscape of executive burnout or these founders who are just quietly falling apart, and suddenly that X-ray machine is entirely useless.
Completely useless. Yeah.
We're looking at a diagnostic landscape that isn't just murky. I mean, it's practically a hall of mirrors.
That is honestly the perfect way to describe it, because the symptoms of the problem we're unpacking today actually look, to the untrained eye, exactly like the symptoms of extreme success.
And that is the paradox we are tearing into today. So I am speaking directly to you, the listener. You might be a successful founder, a senior executive, maybe a partner at a firm, or a business owner who has definitively won the external game.
You've got the track record.
Exactly. You've got the revenue milestones, the prestigious title, the team of direct reports. On paper, on LinkedIn, at the dinner party, you are the person everyone else wants to be.
You are the anchor. You are the one who solves the problems, the one who carries the weight for everyone else.
But quietly, privately, when the laptop is closed and you're sitting alone in your car in the driveway before going inside, there's this lingering, hollow emptiness. Yeah. It's an exhaustion that sleep just doesn't fix anymore. It's a profound disconnection. You have acquired absolutely everything you set out to build 10 years ago, but you feel like some fundamental piece of the machinery is just missing.
Right. It's like the engine is running, but the car isn't going anywhere.
Exactly. Yeah. I like to think of it like having a brand new, top-of-the-line smartphone. The industrial design is flawless. The screen is pristine. It's objectively the most powerful device on the market.
Okay, I like this.
But it is burning hot in your pocket, and the battery is inexplicably dying by 11:00 a.m. And it's doing that because there are 100 background apps running, just draining the energy, and you don't even have the administrative privileges to see them, let alone swipe them away.
I love that smartphone analogy because it captures the hidden nature of the drain so perfectly. I mean, the external hardware is flawless, right?
Right.
But the internal operating system is in a constant state of silent, catastrophic overdrive. And today, we are entirely focused on rewriting that operating system. We're delving into the biological and neurological reality of leadership. Specifically, we're doing a deep dive through the lens of a framework called the 4 Empires system.
Which was developed by executive coach Masab Kaldi, right?
Exactly. And we are focusing intensely on the critical day 1 of this 12-day methodology. And just to be clear, right out of gate, this is not about generic motivation.
Oh, definitely not.
If you want a pep talk or, a poster with a soaring eagle telling you to think positive, this isn't for you.
Right. We aren't here to offer platitudes. The premise Kaldi operates on is brutal but necessary. High achievement without a unified inner foundation isn't just tiring. It is, in his exact terminology, suicide on slow motion.
Suicide on slow motion. It's a chilling phrase.
It really is.
But from a purely physiological standpoint, it is incredibly accurate. When you look at the endocrine system of a chronically stressed high achiever, their body is literally breaking its own tissues down to sustain the output.
Wow. Okay, so let's trace this back to where it started. Because this framework wasn't cooked up in some sterile academic laboratory. It was born out of a spectacular, terrifying physical collapse.
Yeah, real crisis.
Musab Kaldi was only 20 years old, which is a time when you're supposed to be biologically bulletproof, right?
You feel invincible at 20.
Exactly. But he pushed himself so hard for achievement, completely ignoring his internal foundation, that his body just pulled the plug. He collapsed and was unconscious for 55 minutes.
55 minutes. And I want to emphasize, 55 minutes of total unconsciousness at 20 years old is not just fatigue.
No.
That is a systemic system failure. Your brain literally shuts off the lights to protect the vital organs because the energetic demand has outstripped the biological supply to a lethal degree. His body forced a truth upon him that his ambition was trying desperately to ignore.
And what blows my mind is that even after a wake-up call that severe, which, let's be honest, would send most people into early retirement or a monastery, he didn't immediately find the answer.
He doubled down.
He really did. He went on to build and fail at over 50 companies. He threw himself into the absolute meat grinder of entrepreneurship. And in the process, he spent over 300,000 pounds, so north of $300,000, on his own personal development.
He was desperate for the fix. I mean, we're talking about 50 grand on therapy, 120 grand on elite executive coaching, 80 grand on specialized retreats, 50 grand on courses.
The ideal customer.
Exactly. He was the ideal student of the self-improvement industry. He did everything a high achiever is supposed to do when they feel that internal friction.
But the result? He remained entirely fragmented. And this is where I want to challenge you, because when I hear someone spent $300K on therapy and coaching and still felt broken, my immediate thought is, well, either he was uncoachable or the entire industry is a scam.
Right. Those are the logical assumptions.
But Caldi's realization, and this is the core thesis of the Four Empires model, is that the problem wasn't a lack of knowledge, and it wasn't a lack of effort. It was a structural error in how we treat human performance.
Exactly. The realization was that he was treating his mind, his heart, his health, and his soul in total airtight isolation.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the personal development world really is incredibly siloed, isn't it?
Oh, completely. You go to a therapist to fix your emotions. You go to an executive coach to fix your business strategy. You go to a personal trainer to fix your body. You go to a retreat to find your spiritual purpose. But none of those practitioners are talking to each other.
They're all working in a vacuum.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the central realization here is that empires aren't built in isolation. They're built through integration.
Integration. Okay, let me test an analogy on you to see if I'm grasping this fragmentation concept.
Go for it.
Imagine a highly tuned Formula One race car. You've got the aerodynamic chassis, the transmission, the incredibly complex hybrid engine, and the custom tires. But let's say they were all designed and built by completely different teams of world-class engineers who were actively forbidden from ever speaking to each other during the design process.
That sounds like a recipe for disaster.
Right, so you bolt all those top-tier, incredibly expensive parts together. Now, off the starting line, it might look amazing. It'll probably be incredibly fast for the first 2 seconds. But the moment it hits high speeds, the moment it enters a corner and the G-force hits, what happens?
It tears itself apart.
Exactly.
Because the aerodynamic downforce is putting pressure on suspension components that weren't calibrated to handle it. The engine's torque output strips the gears in a transmission that was built for a completely different power curve. It is a catastrophic failure caused by a lack of integration.
The individual parts are flawless, but the system is fundamentally compromised. So translate that from a race car into a real-world executive. Break down these 4 empires for me. Mindset, Heartset, Healthset, Soulset. What does it actually look like in a boardroom when a leader is highly developed in one area but completely deficient in the others?
What's fascinating here is how it creates very specific, very dangerous leadership archetypes.
Oh.
Let's start with the most common one in corporate environments, the mindset isolation. Let's say you spend all your time optimizing your cognitive growth, your strategic thinking, your mental toughness. You do that entirely at the expense of your Heartset, which is your emotional connection, your empathy, your authenticity.
Oh, man, I can immediately picture this person.
We all can, right? You develop this cold, ruthless, impenetrable confidence. You make razor-sharp operational decisions, but you are a nightmare to work for.
Yeah.
You push everyone away. Your executive team doesn't respect you. They fear you. And because they fear you, they stop telling you the truth about the business. You isolate yourself on a throne of sheer intellectual competence, but your organization rots from the inside out because there is no psychological safety.
Okay, that's the classic tyrannical CEO. But let's flip it. What if a leader realizes they are too harsh and they over-rotate into the heart?
Right. So if you do all the Heartset work, you go to therapy, you build immense emotional depth, vulnerability, and empathy for your team, but you completely ignore your Healthset. Yeah. Your biological vitality, your physical resilience. You end up as the tragic martyr.
The martyr.
Yes. You have all this wonderful emotional empathy for your team's struggles. You want to build this incredibly supportive culture, but you have absolutely zero physiological energy to actually execute on it.
So you're just constantly drained.
Exactly. You can't hold boundaries because you're too exhausted. You burn out trying to care for everyone else, and the business fails because the leader is simply too tired to lead.
Wow. Okay, what about the health biohackers? You know, the ones obsessed with optimizing their physical state?
Oh, this is a very modern archetype. If
Yeah.
you focus purely on Healthset, you're doing the cold plunges, the specialized diets, tracking your sleep scores to the decimal, you have perfect physical vitality.
Mm,
But if you have ignored your soul set, which is your deep internal sense of purpose and meaning, you become a very tragic figure.
tragic how.
You are basically just a highly energetic, incredibly fit person running on a treadmill to nowhere. You have all the energy in the world, but your daily work feels utterly meaningless. It's biological perfection wrapped around a spiritual void.
That sounds exhausting in a totally different way.
Yeah.
And the final combination.
If you focus heavily on soul work, you know your deep, profound purpose in the universe. But you lack the rigorous mindset, the strategic execution to bring it to life, you are just a dreamer.
Right.
You have a beautiful vision that will never exist in the real world because you lack the cognitive architecture to build it.
It paints such a vivid, almost painful picture. And if we look at the target persona for Quality's framework, it's rarely someone failing openly. It's a silent suffering.
Yeah, very silent.
Picture a founder who has just hit a massive Series C funding milestone, a valuation they've been obsessing over, sacrificing their 20s and 30s for. They're standing in the office, popping champagne with the board, everyone is cheering, the confetti is falling, and then the party ends.
The quiet moments.
Right. They get in the back of their Uber to go home, and as they watch the streetlights pass by in silence, instead of feeling triumphant, they feel completely, overwhelmingly hollow. Like, is this it? I gave up my marriage and my health for this.
Or consider the senior leader whose calendar is a solid, impenetrable block of back-to-back Zoom calls from 8 a.m. to 7 a.m. p.m. They are the linchpin of the company.
Oh yeah, the reliable one.
Exactly. In every single meeting, they are the one projecting absolute, unwavering confidence. They're giving directives, absorbing everyone else's panic, untangling supply chain issues. But underneath that calm exterior, they are running entirely on the fumes of their own adrenaline.
Just reacting.
Yes, they aren't actually creating strategy anymore. They are trapped in a perpetual loop of reacting to crises. And worse, they've started to wear that exhaustion like a badge of honor.
Which brings me to a massive point of friction, a real pushback here.
Okay, let's hear it.
We are talking about incredibly smart people here. These are grade A leaders. Visionaries who can spot market trends 5 years out. People who can orchestrate complex global mergers.
If you have the cognitive horsepower to build a $50 million company, shouldn't you be smart enough to realize you are burning out? I mean, why doesn't their extreme intelligence solve this problem? If they feel the void in the Uber, why don't they just fix it the way they fix the supply chain?
Because the very tools that built the $50 million company are completely useless when applied to the internal operating system.
Wait, really?
Yeah. There is a crucial neurological truth we have to confront here. Knowledge without a structured behavioral system doesn't rewire anything.
But wait, the entire self-improvement industry is based on acquiring knowledge.
And that's exactly why the industry has a massive failure rate when it comes to lasting transformation.
Wow. You can read 50 books on executive burnout. You can listen to hundreds of deep dives about the exact mechanics of the HPA axis, cortisol, and stress. You can intellectually map out exactly why you are exhausted. But intellectualizing a problem is not the same as changing the physical neural pathways in your brain that dictate your automated behaviors.
It's the difference between memorizing the aerodynamic physics of how a bicycle stays upright versus actually getting on the saddle and having the balance to ride it. I can read a book on bicycle physics, but if I try to ride one having never practiced, I'm going to crash immediately.
Precisely. That's a great analogy. These leaders do not have an information deficit. If you ask that exhausted CEO if they should sleep more, they will say yes. If you ask them if checking Slack at midnight is bad for them, they will say yes.
Like they know it's bad.
They know they have a system problem. And what is truly insidious is how this pattern of disconnection hides brilliantly behind their own competence.
Yes. The armor of competence. This is where I think anyone in a high-pressure role is going to feel uncomfortably seen. How does being good at your job actually prevent you from healing?
Because when you are highly capable, your success becomes the ultimate shield against self-reflection. You are the reliable one, Everyone looks to you, investors, employees, your spouse. So your extreme, unrelenting busyness becomes a socially acceptable, even highly praised excuse to completely ignore your internal state.
You literally get applauded for the behavior that is destroying you. Like, oh, Sarah's amazing. She's always online. She answered my email at 2 a.m.
Exactly. And internally, you use that praise to rationalize the pain. You convince yourself that your problem is purely a strategy problem.
Yeah.
You tell yourself, if I can just hire one more VP of operations, if we can just close this next round of funding, if we can just get through Q4, then the pressure will ease up and I'll have time to breathe.
But the horizon just keeps moving. Q4 becomes Q1.
Always. Because it's not a strategy problem.
Yeah.
It is an identity problem. Your identity has become entirely enmeshed with being the savior, the closer, the one who suffers for the good of the company. If you fix the strategy and suddenly have free time, you lose your identity.
So they are literally using their corporate responsibilities to avoid sitting in a quiet room with themselves.
Without question. Think about the archetype of the senior manager who physically leaves the office, drives home, sits at the dinner table with their partner and kids, but cannot biologically switch off.
Yeah, physically present, mentally absent.
Right. Their eyes are on their family, but their hand is under the table scrolling through Slack. They justify it by saying, I'm just being responsible. The team needs me. I'm the only one who can handle this client.
And if I were to challenge that manager, I'd say, are you really the only one? Or have you intentionally bottlenecked the company around yourself so you always feel essential?
Ouch. That is the dagger of a question right there. Because in reality, beneath that noble narrative of duty and responsibility lies an absolute terror of stopping. It is an inability to sit silence. Because they know, subconsciously, that if they stop moving, if the external noise drops to zero, the profound emptiness they've been outrunning for a decade is finally going to catch up to them.
That is profound. And it's terrifying because you can't outthink that. If your intelligence just builds thicker, more sophisticated armor, how do we actually break the cycle? If intellectualizing it just makes you better at defending your dysfunction, how do we rebuild this integrated system without just giving this exhausted person another to-do list item that causes more burnout?
Well, to bypass the armor of the intellect, we have to drop down into the biological basement. We have to shift from the abstract realm of thoughts, psychology, and motivation straight into the neurological, structural reality of the brain. You can't outthink your nervous system. You have to outtrain it.
Outtrain it. Okay.
And to do that, Caldi's Four Empires framework zeroes in on the most highly leveraged window of human biology, which is the first hour of your day. Day one of his 12-day protocol is singularly obsessed with conquering this specific window.
So the premise here is your morning determines your day. Your day determines your life. It sounds like a bumper sticker, but we are about to look at the violent biology behind it. Before we talk about the solution, we have to look at the baseline. What is happening in the body of this leader before they even start trying to fix things? The framework calls this the day zero reality. And frankly, the biological data here is horrifying.
It's a physiological disaster zone. The baseline starting point for most of these executives is waking up with a cortisol level hovering around 78 ngml.
Stop there. Explain cortisol to me and give me context for 78 nanograms per milliliter. What does that actually mean?
Right, so cortisol is your body's primary stress hormone. It's produced by the adrenal glands. It's part of the HPA axis, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. In a healthy ancestral environment, cortisol is what spikes when a tiger steps out of the bushes.
Fight or flight.
Exactly. It diverts blood away from your digestive system, away from your prefrontal cortex, which handles deep thought, and shoves all that energy into your limbs so you can run for your life. It is the physiological state of acute panic.
Okay, so it's a survival mechanism.
Right. And a normal, healthy waking cortisol level should be significantly lower, just gently waking you up. 78 ngml means you are waking up with the biological equivalent of a tiger standing on your chest.
So let's walk through what a 78 ngml morning looks like in practice. The alarm goes off at 6:30 a.m. What is the literal first physical action this executive takes?
They reach out from under the covers, grab the phone off the nightstand, and unlock the screen. Before their feet have even touched the floor, before they have taken a conscious breath, they're checking emails, scanning Slack channels, looking at the overnight stock fluctuations, reading the news.
Now, wait. Everyone says, don't check your phone in bed. It's a bad habit. But I want to push back on the severity of this. If I'm managing a global supply chain and a factory in Shenzhen had a fire overnight, I need to know at 6:30 a.m. Isn't it irresponsible for me not to check my phone? How does looking at a screen actually damage my biology?
It's a great rationalization, and it sounds perfectly logical. But here is the neurological cascade you are triggering. When you open that phone, you are instantaneously forcing your brain out of a resting state and into a highly reactive sympathetic nervous system state.
The sympathetic state, that's the panic mode.
Yes, the fight or flight mode.
Right.
By flooding your brain with external demands, threats, and crises the very second you wake up, you are confirming to your amygdala that you are under attack.
So you aren't waking up and deciding how to lead. You are waking up and immediately surrendering the command of your own brain to whoever sent you an email.
Exactly. You are immediately on the defensive. And biologically, this has severe downstream consequences. Because you started in reaction mode, your brain burns through its neurotransmitter reserves at an accelerated rate. By 8:00 a.m., you are already making decisions from a place of biochemical panic, even if you look calm on the outside.
You're just masking the panic with a sharp suit and a coffee.
Right. And because you've been aggressively spiking your cortisol and burning through your cognitive fuel since the moment you open your eyes, you inevitably hit severe decision fatigue by 10:00 a.m.
Which means every choice you make after 10 a.m. requires twice the effort for half the quality.
Which naturally leads to a massive metabolic and energy crash by noon. You grab a heavy lunch, maybe another espresso, and for the entire rest of the afternoon, you are no longer leading. You are just running on fumes, reacting to whatever fire burns brightest, snapping at employees, and making survival-level choices. By the evening, the data tracking these executives shows they're operating at a dismal 38% cognitive performance capacity.
Here's where it gets really interesting. 38%. I really want that number to sink in for a second. Let's put a scenario to that. Let's say you are a CEO, and at 4:30 p.m., you are on a Zoom call negotiating the final terms of a $10 million acquisition. You are sitting at that desk, trying to process complex legal clauses and read the room with 38% of your brain's actual capacity online.
You are legally impaired at that point. I mean, you wouldn't drive a car at 38% visual capacity, but you are steering a company.
That one email you decided to react to in bed at 6:30 a.m. literally, biologically ruined your ability to be a competent strategic leader at 4:30 p.m. The cause and effect is just staggering.
And this is exactly why the Four Empires system doesn't prescribe a mindset shift. It prescribes a 22-day critical installation phase. This is the neuroplasticity window.
Okay, why 22 days and why the emphasis on neuroplasticity?
Because you cannot change a deeply entrenched reactive biological state by just intellectually deciding to be calmer tomorrow. Your brain has physically wired itself through thousands of mornings of grabbing the phone to expect panic.
So the panic is hardwired.
Exactly. The neural pathways associated with stress are thick and highly insulated. The pathways associated with calm and strategic pacing are thin and weak. To change this, the brain requires physical, structural rewiring through sustained, daily practice. Neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to reorganize itself by forming new neural connections. It takes roughly 22 days of uninterrupted, specific behavioral stimulus to weaken the old pathways and solidify the new ones.
And what are the biological targets of this 22-day window? What does success actually look like under a microscope?
The neurological targets are incredibly specific and measurable. By shifting from a reactive state to a deliberate state every morning for 22 days, the protocol aims for a 60% reduction in waking cortisol. We're talking about dropping it from that frantic panic state of 78 ngml all the way down to a controlled, healthy 31 ngml.
Taking the tiger off the chest.
Exactly. And furthermore, it aims for a 134% improvement in prefrontal cortex activation. The prefrontal cortex is the evolutionary masterpiece of the human brain. It's responsible for logic, executive decision-making, emotional regulation, and long-term planning. You are essentially turning the power back on in the executive suite of your mind.
Okay, the stakes are massive. The goal is structural brain change. Now, let's get into the mechanics. I'll break down the exact non-negotiable solution for day one. This is the anchor of the whole system. It is called the 20-20-20 protocol. It is a 60-minute system designed to happen between 5:00 a.m. and 6:00 a.m.
And it is broken into 3 distinct, highly intentional 20-minute phases: move, reflect, and learn. This builds the Mindset Empire foundation.
Let's start with phase 1, minute 0 to 20, move V. We are very clear here that we are not talking about a leisurely morning stroll around the cul-de-sac with the dog and a thermos of coffee.
Not even close. The goal here is intense, systemic physical activation. We're talking about subjecting the body to controlled shock.
Controlled shock? Like what?
Activities like a 3-minute freezing cold plunge, a hard lung-burning run, intense combat sports like shadow boxing, or even high-intensity dance. The metric of success for these 20 minutes is not calories burned. It is elevating your heart rate strictly between 120 and 140 beats per minute and significantly raising your core body temperature.
Okay, I'm going to push back incredibly hard on
I
this.
figured you might.
I mean, I am looking at this exhausted, burned out executive. They have 78 ngml of cortisol. They are running on fumes. Their adrenals are shot. And your solution is to wake them up in the pitch black at 5:00 a.m. and throw them into a freezing tub of water or make them sprint until they taste blood in their mouth. Doesn't adding acute physical stress to an already chronically stressed system just accelerate a heart attack?
It is the most logical objection to have, but it fundamentally misunderstands the difference between chronic psychological stress and acute physical eustress.
Yeah.
Yes. Oo, meaning good. Chronic stress, like worrying about a board meeting for 3 weeks, is a low-grade, persistent drip of cortisol that rots the system. Acute physical eustress, the intense shock of a cold plunge or a sprint, is a massive, brief spike that the body is evolutionarily designed to handle.
Oh, so it's a different mechanism entirely.
Exactly. And more importantly, if we connect this to the bigger picture, this specific type of physical stress forces the brain to release a miraculous protein called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor.
BDNF, the brain learning molecule. I've heard neuroscientists talk about this with almost religious reverence. What does it actually do?
Think of BDNF as high-grade biological fertilizer for the brain. When you elevate your heart rate to 130 BPM, the brain senses the physical exertion and assumes you are navigating a complex, demanding environment, perhaps hunting or migrating. To help you survive, it floods the brain with BDNF.
Right.
This protein physically supports the survival of existing neurons and encourages the growth and differentiation of new neurons and synapses.
It's literally building the hardware.
Yes. It clears away the metabolic waste that causes mental fog. It acts as a highly effective natural antidepressant by elevating your mood and reducing inflammation in the brain.
And the absolute kicker here, the ROI for dragging yourself out of bed and suffering through that intense 20 minutes, is that the BDNF doesn't just vanish when you stop running. It stays elevated in your system for up to 8 hours.
This is the competitive advantage. You are literally bathing your brain in neurofertilizer and mood stabilizers before you ever ask it to make a strategic business decision. You are priming the biological machine for excellence.
So when you sit down at your desk at 8 a.m., your brain is structurally more capable of complex thought than it was the day before.
You are commanding your physiology, actively turning on the growth mechanisms, rather than letting the demands of your inbox dictate your state.
Okay, I'm sold on the biology of the suffering. So your heart is pounding, you're sweating, your brain is flooded with BDNF, the physical body is fully activated. And then the protocol takes a massive, jarring left turn, phase 2, minute 20 to 40, reflect. We go from extreme, intense movement to absolute, uncompromising stillness.
This is the neurological counterbalance. It is where the real psychological surgery happens. For these 20 minutes, you sit down in silence. You close your eyes. You can use a structured journaling prompt if you need an anchor, or specific breathwork patterns to slow the heart rate. But the core overarching objective is to simply notice your autopilot thoughts without judgment.
This sounds a lot like meditation, but the framework emphasizes a specific active technique here, labeling the thoughts. When a thought pops up, instead of going down the rabbit hole with it, you just stick a Post-it note on it.
Yes, labeling is key.
You say to yourself, silently, planning or worry or criticism or memory. I absolutely love this concept. I like to compare it to the mundane task of sorting your physical mail. Well, when you go out to your mailbox and grab a huge stack of envelopes, you don't open every single piece of junk mail, read it cover to cover, agonize over the coupons, and let it ruin your day. You stand over the recycling bin and you just sort it. Electric bill, junk. Catalog, junk. IRS letter, junk.
I love that.
Labeling your thoughts is exactly the same mechanic. You aren't reading the junk mail of your anxiety. You aren't dissecting why you are worried about Q3. You are just looking at the thought, putting it in a pile by saying, oh, that's just worry, and letting it drop into the mental recycling bin.
That is a brilliant analogy because it highlights the exact cognitive skill being built in this 20-minute window, which is metacognition. Metacognition is, simply put, the awareness of your own mind. It is thinking about thinking. By sorting the mail, as you put it, you are stepping back and taking the position of the observer. You are watching your thoughts rather than being controlled by them.
But let's be real. If you ask a grade A hyperachieving leader to sit in absolute silence for 20 minutes and just watch their thoughts, they will tell you it is pure torture. Why is this specific practice so incredibly difficult, even repulsive for them?
Because Sitting in silence strips away the armor of competence we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
When you stop moving, when you stop solving problems and answering emails, the external noise drops.
Yeah.
And into that quiet space, the emptiness they've been running from creeps in.
The void.
Yes, the imposter syndrome, the exhaustion, the fear that they are failing as a parent because they work so much, it all bubbles up. It's terrifying.
Yeah.
But by practicing this labeling technique, the leader creates a vital psychological gap.
A gap between stimulus and response?
Exactly. They separate their core identity from their transient anxieties.
Right.
They begin to realize, on a deep experiential level, I am not my terror about the Q3 numbers. I am the consciousness observing that terror.
And neurologically, what is mechanically shifting in the brain during these 20 minutes of silence and labeling?
When you label an emotion, fMRI scans show that activity actually decreases in the amygdala, which is the brain's alarm bell, and increases in the right ventrolateral prefrontal cortex. You are intentionally, mechanically shifting your nervous system out of the sympathetic activated state, the fight or flight, and into the parasympathetic state, which is the rest and digest or calm state.
So you're manually overriding the panic.
By sitting still and observing, you are proving to your primitive brain that you are safe. There is no tiger. This parasympathetic shift is the biological prerequisite for moving from a reactive leadership style to a deliberate one.
Which sets us up perfectly for the final phase. We are at minute 40. Phase 3. Learn. Look at the state the executive is in right now. The body is primed with BDNF from the movement. The nervous system is deeply calm and parasympathetic from the reflection. The mind is clear of junk mail. Now it is time to intentionally feed the prefrontal cortex.
Minute 40 to 60. The protocol mandates reading exactly 10 pages of high-quality, growth-focused content. This could be a dense strategic book, philosophy, leadership theory. Alternatively, listening to a highly strategic podcast or lecture.
Okay.
The objective is to feed your brain with intentional, architected information before the chaotic world gets a chance to feed you its emergencies.
So what does this all mean? I have to stop you here and ask, why only 10 pages? High achievers are usually the types who boast about speed reading 300-page business books over a weekend to maximize their efficiency. Telling them to read 10 pages feels like telling a sports car to drive 15 miles an hour. Why is the rule here so explicitly consistency over intensity?
Because reading a book over a weekend isn't learning, it's data collection. This comes back to the deep science of how the brain actually consolidates information and builds new pathways. Think about the precise biological state you are in during this specific 5:40 a.m. window.
You're flooded with BDNF.
Right. You have high BDNF circulating from the exercise, meaning your brain is highly plastic and literally primed to build new physical connections.
The fertilizer is in the soil.
Exactly. Simultaneously, you are in a deep parasympathetic state from the reflection. This is crucial because when you are in a sympathetic stress state, your brain filters all incoming information through the lens of immediate survival. It ignores long-term strategy. But in a parasympathetic state, your stress is low, your threat detection is off, and your focus is sharp.
You are in peak optimal learning mode.
You are. And if you read a challenging strategic 10 pages in this specific, highly primed state every single morning, that information is not going to be filtered out as irrelevant. It is going to be integrated deeply into your actual behavioral pathways. Because the brain isn't busy fighting tigers, it can take those 10 pages and physically build new synapses around the concepts. It becomes part of your instinctual leadership toolkit.
Whereas the weekend binge reading.
Conversely, if you try to devour a whole book on a frantic Sunday afternoon while your cortisol is spiking because you are secretly dreading Monday's board meeting, your brain is in survival mode. The book's contents will just be intellectually categorized as trivia in your short-term memory.
You'll be able to quote it at a dinner party, but it won't change how you behave when the pressure hits.
Exactly. The 20-20-20 protocol is about installing new neural software, not just collecting data on a hard drive.
Installing software, that is a brilliant distinction. So we've mapped out the 60 minutes, moved to spike BDNF, reflect to shift into a parasympathetic state, and build metacognition. Learn to install the new software while the brain is plastic. It's an airtight biological sequence.
It really is.
But as someone who talks to a lot of executives, I can already hear the massive towering objection coming from our target listener. I can hear the time-starved CEO saying, "This all sounds amazing, I love the science, but you clearly haven't seen my calendar."
Oh, I've heard this 1,000 times.
Right. They'll say, "I have 2 toddlers, I have global teams across 3 different time zones, I start taking calls at 6:30 a.m. I literally, mathematically do not have a spare 60 minutes in my day to do jumping jacks and read philosophy."
It is the most common, the most predictable, and frankly, the most valid-sounding objection they offer. Sounds entirely reasonable.
Hmm.
But we have to ruthlessly deconstruct the math of their day and examine the actual ROI of this single hour.
Let's do the math, because the argument here is that you aren't just losing an hour of sleep, you are buying back the entire afternoon.
Precisely. Let's revisit that day-o baseline. The leader who wakes up reactive, grabs the phone, spikes their cortisol to 78 ngml, and crashes by noon. By 4:00 p.m., they're operating at 38% cognitive capacity. Think about the sheer waste of time occurring in the afternoon for that person.
It's massive.
They're spending hours staring blankly at their screen, rereading the same emails without comprehending them. They're making poor, reactive decisions that will inevitably blow up and require 3 hours to fix the next morning. They are snapping at their team, destroying morale, which leads to employee turnover, which means they have to spend 40 hours interviewing replacements.
The downstream time cost of being exhausted is just astronomical.
Exactly. So by spending 60 minutes between 5:00 and 00:00 a.m. to own the morning and regulate your biology, you completely prevent the 38% crash. You stay at a highly functional cognitive baseline all day.
The results expected just by the evening of day 1 of this protocol are fascinating. It says that if you execute this by dinner time on that very first day, you will experience a distinct state of calm confidence. You'll have crystal clarity on your priorities, and your team will immediately notice a shift in your physical presence.
Because you stop being a frantic bottleneck, vibrating with anxiety, and you start being a grounding force. You become the eye of the storm rather than the storm itself.
And the long-term ROI, if they commit to the full 22-day neuroplasticity window, is where the numbers get truly wild. If we look at the data derived from the 50-plus founders who went through this specific 12-day framework, the improvements aren't incremental. They are exponential.
We are looking at sustained cognitive function jumping from that dismal 28 to 38% baseline up to 91% capacity in the evenings. Emotional regulation, which is the ability to absorb a massive problem, not lose your cool, and respond strategically, jumps from 32% to 94%. And my absolute favorite metric, overall decision quality, improves by 112%.
A 112% improvement in decision quality. I mean, for a CEO, for a founder navigating a complex market, that is the difference between millions of dollars gained or lost. It's the difference between laying off 20 people or giving them bonuses. That is the hard financial ROI of waking up an hour earlier to do the work.
And this brings us to the ultimate philosophical and practical goal of the Four Empires system. This entire process is about building anti-fragility.
Anti-fragility. Explain that in this context.
Anti-fragility isn't just resilience. Resilience is a rock. It takes a hit and stays the same. Anti-fragility is a muscle. It takes a hit, tears slightly, and grows back stronger. This framework is not asking the highly ambitious type A leader to abandon their ambition. It is not saying, your drive is toxic, you need to quit your job, move to a cabin in the woods, and weave baskets to be happy.
Right. It's not a retreat from the world. It's not asking you to lower your standards.
It is the exact opposite.
It is.
It is demanding you raise your standards for your internal biology. It is about fully integrating your cognitive performance, the mindset, your emotional authenticity, the Heartset, your physical vitality, the Healthset, and your deepest meaning, the Soulset.
Building the whole engine?
Yes. When those four engines are synchronized, you can lead from a place of absolute, unshakable wholeness. It allows you to build a business that scales infinitely, and a life that isn't just successful on a spreadsheet, but actually feels beautiful, grounded, and aligned on the inside.
That is the perfect encapsulation. We have covered a tremendous amount of ground in this deep dive. We started by looking at the slow motion collapse that happens when we achieve isolated success without that integrated inner foundation, those empty champagne moments in the back of the Uber. We recognize how incredibly insidious the trap of our own competence can be, how we weaponize our extreme busyness as a shield to avoid facing the quiet void.
And we broke down the biological, non-negotiable escape route, the neuroscience of the 20-20-20 protocol. Moving to spike BDNF and physically build the brain's hardware, reflecting and labeling thoughts to shift into a deliberate parasympathetic state and build metacognition. And finally, learning to install new strategic software pathways while the mind is plastic. All of it designed to rebuild a unified foundation over a 22-day neuroplasticity window.
And as a direct reminder to you, the leader listening to this right now, this deep dive was not designed to be just another piece of intellectual trivia for you to ponder on your commute and forget by lunch. This is a highly specific biological tool for you to use tomorrow morning between 5:00 a.m. and 6:00 a.m.
Set the alarm tonight. Put the phone in another room. No excuses, no exceptions. Reclaim that first hour of biology before the chaotic demands of the world claim you.
As we wrap up, I want to leave you with one small, intensely private reflection to mull over today. There is no shame here, no judgment. This is purely a diagnostic question for you to ask yourself honestly. Think about the one area of your business or your life where you are the absolute most competent, the area where you are the ultimate fixer, the one most heavily relied upon by everyone else. Got it.
Really picture it.
Now ask yourself, is it possible that your extreme praised competence in that specific area is exactly the mechanism you are using to hide from your own exhaustion?
That is the question that unlocks the cage.
Thank you for joining us on this custom deep dive. Take back your first hour tomorrow. We'll see you next time.